Hello, this is Blair Braden, Managing Principal and Co-founder at Denver Wealth Management, as well as your host for today's episode of Mind of a Millionaire podcast. Thanks for listening as always. And please, if you want some more information, you like what you're hearing, go to our website, denverwealthmanagement.com, sign up for our newsletter, and please subscribe to our podcast. I am super pumped today to have this podcast an opportunity. We're fortunate as advisors. We get to talk to many different people in many different situations. And there's always a question that comes up about different investment opportunities or something that people can do to generate more cash flow. Over the evolution of some of the online websites like Airbnb, VRBO, we have had a ton of questions around the opportunity to do those sort of things. I do a little bit of it myself, but I'm no expert by any means. I always love to leverage other experts in our field as far as how does one go about doing these sort of things. And so today I'm super pumped. I don't have to be the expert on how someone goes and builds their Airbnb or VRBO empire as a part of their portfolio, how they finance that. I don't have to describe all the ins and outs of that because today we have some wonderful guests on our podcast. The first is Dan Mackin. He is the owner of Millennial Real Estate Investor Agents, as well as Nora and TJ Lile, who are the owners of Integrity Mortgage Company. And so we get a chance to learn from these wonderful folks who have a lot of experience helping people in these areas, as well as, how do they finance it? How do they pay for it? So first thing I want to do is let these folks introduce themselves a little bit, tell us about them. And Dan, if you don't mind starting, and we're going to get into the real estate piece for sure, but let's start with a little bit of who you are. Where'd you grow up? What gets you going? What gets you out of bed every day?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, my name is Dan Mackin. I've grown up basically in Colorado. I can't have the stupid native sticker that everybody seems to want to have, but I've been here since I was 5 years old. Grew up in the Louisville area before it was cool. I always have to reference it that way. And then realistically, I've stuck around here most of my life. My family's here. It's a great place to live. I have to get mad at my parents for picking a place that's actually cool to live in. We couldn't have moved to the middle of Iowa or somewhere where most people try to leave. And so realistically, I just on a daily basis, I hang out with my family, do some good work, and just try to have a good time and actually enjoy Colorado for what it is. And, actually utilize it for the thing. The joke we always have with people is everybody's moving to Colorado to be close to the mountains and never actually go to the mountains. So I'm trying not to fit within that mindset there of I'm here for the mountains, so go use them as much as possible.
So you're an I-70 warrior, huh?
Yeah, or taking back roads because they're more fun.
All right, Nora and TJ, would you guys do the same? Introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you outside of business.
Yeah, so I'm TJ Lile. This is my wife, Norah Lile, and we own Integrity Mortgage Company. I do have a stupid native sticker on my car because I was born here. But yeah, I'm originally from Pueblo, Colorado, and have graduated. I'm a graduate of CSU in Fort Collins and lived around the country a little bit, but have found myself coming right back here to Colorado. So we like all the outdoor type things, hunting, snowboarding, all that good stuff, as well as, just trying to experience all of what Colorado has to offer here. So, and then Nora, feel free to share a little about yourself.
Thanks, TJ. I'm Norah Lile, and I'm a military brat. We'll just say that. So I've lived all over, but I've called Colorado home for the last 25, 30 years. So I'm almost a native. And when I'm not working on mortgages, we do have a 5-year-old at home that keeps us pretty entertained. And we like to camp around Colorado in our RV and do everything outside that we can. But TJ and I opened Integrity Mortgage Company because we wanted to make sure that we were doing the right things for clients at all times and that we had the authority to do that. So we're very passionate about the mortgage lending industry, and we love working with Dan and Denver Wealth Management.
Thank you, Nora. And at some point, we might have to do a podcast on what's it like having a business with your spouse.
Oh gosh.
and working with your spouse all day, every day.
That'd be a couple hours. You might have to bring a mediator.
Yeah.
So the other day we were talking, and Dan, you brought up a term to me that I was unfamiliar with, and maybe we can start there. You said, I'm a house hacker. That's what I help people do. We house hack. What the heck is house hacking?
So house hacking, in the simplest term, is utilizing a property for income that normally wouldn't be utilized for that. So, a lot of people think it could be anywhere from renting a bedroom in your house to renting separate spaces in your house to just buying a house in creative ways and kind of making extra income from that. It's kind of going outside the box and doing that. So, for reference, right now, I live up in Erie on the north end of Denver, and we have a full walkout basement that's unfinished that we don't use. We have plenty of space upstairs. We don't really use the backyard just because, for anybody who's had a walkout basement, they're not really usable yards. They're just a hillside. So we have this entire lower level that we're not using right now. So starting next month, we are finishing that out into a second unit that, we'll go through and have that rented out. We're going to try short term, but also it's Erie. So nobody has any idea how well you can Airbnb something in Erie, because we're kind of in the middle of nowhere, depending on what you're looking at. But basically the whole point of house hacking is reducing cost of living or utilizing properties in some creative methods to really offset the cost of living there. So we'll use mine for reference. Our mortgage right now with HOA and everything else is about $2,400 a month. We should easily be able to get that cost down to less than $1,000 a month to live in our house upstairs, have a full 4-bed, 2.5 bath with garage, nice front yard, nice street, and views for days. Where most people around here, you're looking at spending over $3,000 for the similar type of home. We can get our cost down to, a third or less than that. Just by doing a few things and using space that we otherwise would never use. It's just an unfinished basement. So
you said two things, though, that I want to ask you a little bit more about. You said we don't know the availability of the market as far as how can we short-term rent this. So my questions are, is there a way to go about predicting that? And secondarily, what's your contingency plan if nobody ever wants to short-term rent your lower level?
So as far as researching the demand for the areas, I will tell you, most markets you can research it. If you're because most places that people are looking for short-term rentals aren't a town of 25,000 people that's kind of a little bit out by itself. Most of the time it's going to be a mountain town or somewhere near a metro area like Denver, things like that. The best ways to go through it, there are websites like the most popular one's called AirDNA. So it's like Airbnb, but with DNA instead. And that's one of the good places to start, where they kind of pool all of the data from a bunch of the different short-term rental websites like Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, all these other places that exist, and try to kind of compile all that data to give you a good idea of what rates you're going to get, what demand you're going to look at, occupancy, other things like that, like how often it's actually going to be filled. And it tries to compile all of that data together for you. The caveat with those websites is, as with anything, any investment, right? You want to have a better idea of what you're actually getting into. So AirDNA is a great way to start. It gives you an idea of what you might be able to get. But from there, then you have to do some other specific things, such as going on Airbnb itself and seeing around where you are, how much people are actually filling up their unit. So you can do this in ways such as you just pick a property. You don't put any dates in. You just go to a property on Airbnb. Don't put the dates in that you want to book it. And then you see how often the calendar is filled up for that property. And that will start giving you good ideas for about how long people are booked out. Obviously, some properties might not be fully available, so it might not show as available a lot of the time, but in a lot of cases they are. And so it's a really good way to go through and reference that. The difficulty we have here in Erie is it's just kind of an odd thing here. We're not a high demand area for the typical, like, hey, I'm coming to Denver to hang out for the weekend or whatever it is. Our demand here most likely is going to be, hey, my family's coming to town. I don't want my mother-in-law in my basement. I want them to be near. Like, we don't, up until 2 years ago, we didn't have hotels within 20 minutes of our house. And so, and even now there's no hotels in Erie. So the closest one to my neighborhood is about 15 minutes away. So at this point, people who want to come to Erie will be coming to stay in our basement, hopefully, with the intent of just, hey, we want to be near family. We also give them the view out the back porch, because from where we are, you can see from basically Lookout Mountain all the way up through Horsetooth Reservoir off our back porch. So we're kind of like, hey, get the view, but also at the same time, be close to family. Even our neighbors asked like, hey, can my mom stay down there next month? And I was like, well, the basement's not done yet, but yes, that's what it will be for. Is you guys can rent it out for the month if you want to. Now, backup plan with that is we can long-term it. We can do a regular tenant down there. We can get again, the rates on that are kind of a range. We're figuring anywhere between $1,100 and $1,400 a month. But again, that will get us close to that $1,000 mark for the mortgage every month that we're trying to hit. So we know even our backup plan is just that we're going to have to sell off the furniture that we bought for Airbnb, which admittedly is not that hard because everybody in the Denver area is trying to set something up like this. You can literally just say, hey, I've got a package. Here's all of the furniture. Here's everything else you need. And just sell that off and convert it over to a regular tenant if we have to.
I don't want my mother-in-law.
Real
Sorry,
quick.
go ahead,
Dan.
Austin.
My question was going to be, why not just go long-term right off the bat? So you all touched on it. You living up in Erie, between Fort Collins, between Denver, maybe not much demand on a regular basis to live there. And I might be surprised. I always am. But why not just go long-term? What are the benefits of a short-term rental?
So in our purposes, we like having people come to stay with us because, we're married, we got kids, we're not bar hopping people. So when friends come to town and other things, it's nice for them to be able to stay locally with us and be able to have, walk upstairs in this case and come have dinner with us, but still have their own space. And based on what most of our clients get with their short-term rentals, we only would need to rent this half the month or less to be able to get the same as we would with a long-term tenant. And so for us, it's worthwhile to try it out because then we have, let's just say half the occupancy, or we keep it available when we want it to, while still making the same money. Whereas, the long-term tenant, yes, there's consistency there. But at the end of the day, part of the goal in this is this full basement finish out is going to run me about $70,000. And I would like to get that paid back sooner than later. So part of this is just going in, seeing if we can maximize the cash flow. And like I said, if it doesn't work, I'm content with the secondary option. It's just more, I like the flexibility of the short term if it exists and it works out.
Sure. Nope. And then one quick follow-up question. Sorry, Blair. Is there a platform that you prefer to run your short-term rentals through? Airbnb, VRBO? Or are they pretty much the same across the board?
They're pretty consistent across the board. So Airbnb is my favorite as far as things go. You'll find there's just certain styles, like VRBO seems to appeal more to places that rent to families. Like bigger properties, where Airbnb seems to be kind of mostly smaller, quick properties, just from my experience. But they both work in tandem well. The complicated part for some people is if you post on both and you have your property on both is, if somebody books on Airbnb, you need to go make sure you're on VRBO to show that it's not available there. So you're not double booking things or having problems with that. There is management software I cannot remember off the top of my head, to be honest right now, that a lot of management companies use that syncs everything, but it's not cheap. And so when one gets booked, it'll syndicate it out to everything else and make sure it's not being double booked everywhere else.
Right.
I don't want my mother-in-law staying in my basement. I want her staying in your basement. Dan.
Exactly.
If you're listening to this, Gigi, I'm just kidding. Come on down. You can stay in the basement anytime you want to. But how accurate are the estimates as far as what you could expect in rental income for things like Air DNA?
They're reasonably close. I would always go in with caution. That's why I always tell people to kind of follow that method I mentioned of go in, look at the numbers there. It's a good reference to you, at least if the numbers might be close to what you're hoping to get, right? It's just kind of a quick guideline of like, same as if you were just doing kind of a back of the napkin underwriting on buying a rental property. You're just kind of looking at saying, here's the rents I think I can get. Here's the purchase price I think I have. Mortgage is going to lay out to X, Y, Z. And so it's more for that purpose of like, should I pursue this further? And if it looks good, that's when you do go and do further research on the main websites themselves to see what other people are getting. And sometimes you can even reach out to the people who have those units, make friends with them. Cause a lot of people are honestly really friendly about it. Cause they're just happy that they're doing it. They're happy about the income. So you can reach out to some of the owners of the places through the websites themselves. You can try to book it or be like, hey, how far out are you booked? We're thinking of something for later this year. You can do whatever you want to try to get the info. There is one YouTuber actually that I'll recommend. His site is called Rob Built, ROB Built. And he goes through a lot of this in detail as far as how to kind of analyze these properties and really dig into the financials of each one and try to figure out what might work for your area, and see if a property is actually worthwhile.
Nora and TJ, Dan mentioned that he needed $70,000 to do the basement. Are there any financing options for that kind of stuff? If someone were to want to house hack but they had to do a lot of capital input in order to get there?
Oh, there's a lot of options depending on if you own the home or if you don't. If you already own the home and you're going to do some improvements to add a kitchen or rehab the basement like he's doing now, then you can always do a cash out refinance and take equity out of your home to improve it. You can do a second mortgage or a home equity line of credit to access the equity in your home. You can also do a renovation loan, and you can do those on either a purchase or a refinance of the property. So when you're purchasing the home, you can actually base the amount that you're allowed to borrow on the as completed value of the home. Now, and Dan could probably comment better on this, how the market is, and it's very competitive right now. And I don't know that a lot of sellers are wanting to accept offer made with a renovation loan, but you can also purchase the loan and then do a renovation loan as a refinance that pays off your current mortgage. And then you can finance based on the as completed value of the home.
So Dan's talking about this in his primary residence. What if this is somebody's home that they buy specifically for Airbnb, short-term rental, long-term rental, whatever? It's an investment property. Do they have any options as an investment property versus their primary residence?
So again, you could always purchase a home and then set up a second mortgage or a HELOC after. As far as the financing on the renovation loans, a lot of them do restrict it to being a primary residence, especially if you're looking at an FHA or a VA rehab type of loan. It has to be a primary residence, but there are still some financing options available on the investment and second home side.
And Dan, do you usually work with people who are doing this as investment properties or their primary residence? I mean, how does that usually work with your clientele?
I would say most of our folks are doing this primary, but the amount of people who have been buying it as a pure investment and not living in it has started to increase over the past 2 years. There are loopholes that, we'll call them loopholes, but there's always things written into the rules for reasons. What's become really popular with our folks over the past couple of years is buying it as a second home. So you can get a second home loan as a vacation home, whatever you want to call it. And that will significantly reduce your down payment in most cases from 20, 25% down to 10% for a lot of those purchases. And so, that's a big chunk of change, especially if you're talking about properties in Colorado. So you can buy that and, immediately use it as a short-term rental, but there are caveats to this. And I know Nora's looked over these rules too and gone through them with me, that for you to have this property as a short-term rental, if you're buying it, let's say everybody's buying mountain properties, right? So that's usually what most people think of when they're thinking of a short-term rental. So let's just say you go buy something in Winter Park and you're going to put 10% down on that. You get the property. You cannot pass that property off to a manager if you've bought it with a second home loan. It has to be a pure investment. So if you want to pass it off to a property management company to take care of completely passively, then you need to at least put that 20 to 25% down. If you are fine with self-managing it from a distance, then you can do it for 10% down. You just have to, the wording, and Nora can correct me on this if I'm wrong, is like you have to maintain control of the property. Like that's the kind of phrasing that the rules seem to use here. So if you pass it to a manager, you've technically given up control because they are the ones running it. Where if you were doing it as a short-term rental and you're the one actually, posting on the website, taking care of answering questions, things like that, then you still maintain control. And we have friends kind of all over the country who do this as well and have bought, in multiple different states and different spots they've deemed worthy for short-term rentals by using the second home mortgages.
And just to add to that, just to be careful, you do also have to, as the purchaser intend to occupy that property for some portion. So it almost works even better with the short-term rental model, because if you long-term rent it out, then you're not going to be able to occupy that property. So with a short-term rental, you may have like a mountain condo, then you can go up there for a few weekends a year. But both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac allow, they say specifically, you can receive rental income on a second home. You just can't use it to qualify. Plus, you have to maintain control of that property, and you have to occupy it for some portion of the year.
So you can't use that projected rental income to qualify for that loan. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying? Okay. And do you guys see many folks doing this frequently? You know, they buy a house, they live in it, they Airbnb a portion of it, and then a few years later, they're maybe moving, keeping that house, and doing the same thing with the new house?
Yep.
And on that real quick, would you mind going more into the demographic as far as any trends you're seeing and who's doing this, who's doing the house hacking, and who might be best suited to embark on this strategy?
Austin's getting ready to rent out his condo. I can just see the wheels turning.
Yeah, it's a 1-bedroom, but I think I can move back in with mom and dad, and then I can rent mine out. Yeah.
Or buy the next one.
The wheels are turning upstairs.
As long as you go sleep on the couch at least a couple of weeks a year, right? And have roommates with Airbnb people there for a little bit.
I've got a garage. I can sleep in there. Sleep in my car.
I like it.
In the garage.
You would not
He's
be
occupying.
compared to some house hackers if you do that.
It would not be what, Dan?
He would not be atypical if he did that. There's all levels of house hackers as far as what they're willing to deal with. You know, I would say I'm kind of on the upper tier as far as like, I want a fully separate space where I will never see them. Where some are like, no, like one guy that's pretty known in Denver, like his whole thing was he bought a duplex for his first property that was an up-down duplex, rented out the upstairs, had like a 600 square foot lower level with like 6'4" ceilings, like this really squat feeling unit. And he would rent out the bedroom and live behind a curtain in the living room. And it worked. I mean, would I want to do that? No. Would most people? No, but there's something for everybody. But if we're talking about demographics of people who do this, first off, most house hackers we have, like if you were actually owner occupying a property, you would be buying, most of our folks buy every 18 to 24 months. And they're buying anywhere from 3 to 5% down. They're not putting a lot of money down these properties, which is the whole point of doing it. So, you know, if you're younger and you're fine with doing this, and even if you're older and fine with moving, you know, if you don't have, like, once you have kids, things are a pain. But if you have the flexibility to move, then do it, because you could buy 3 to 4 properties and just have to move for the same as you would have to put down to buy one rental property. So you could get 4 for the same price of 1. And within that, the demographics range. I mean, my parents are in their early 60s and they have a basement apartment at their house and they do it. They looked at it as, hey, this one unit in our basement of space, they have a 5,300 square foot house. It's huge. And that whole lower level, they would never use. Like, it's just space that was extra. So we just bought them a place that had that second apartment so that when they retire in the next few years here, their entire cost of living at that house is paid for just by renting out space they would never use. You know, and it's all up to you. Everybody's going to have that question of, you know, what about the tenant being loud or whatever else? There's ways to mitigate that in every house. I'm spending a few extra grand in my basement to make sure that I won't be able to hear who's below me. We're doing lots of sound insulation. But the age range is kind of all over the place. We have, you know, I would say a decent chunk of the people we work with are kind of in their 20s and early 30s. Because they're still kind of in that flexible spot of their life where they can do these things and, you know, make it work and be willing to move. But you'll find even a 25-year-old hates moving 3 or 4 times within a couple of years. But it really is kind of for everybody if you have that comfort of it. The difference is, the one rule that people need to know is, to turn something into a rental property, you only have to live there for a year. So it's not this like, oh, I have all these weird classifications and qualifications I have to hit. You live there for a year. You've technically met the qualifications of the loan that you signed up for in almost all cases, and you can move on and buy another one. So it's kind of flexible for everybody. And again, the whole point here is you don't have to live in it. You know, there's ways to make this work for everybody. And sometimes you don't even have to short term it. Some people just buy a single family property that has kind of 2 separate spaces and use that as a rental. There's all kinds of ways, basically.
And we're not tax advisors, as everyone knows here at Denver Wealth Management. But if you're trying to do this strategy with the idea of selling your home, this one that you're moving into primarily, The rule that allows us to avoid capital gains tax on selling our personal residence, you need to live in it for 2 out of the prior 5 years. So beyond financing, there might be some other things to consider as far as how often you're moving out of these houses. But cash flow, I always talk to our small business people about how important cash flow is when I'm personally am looking at buying real estate, but any investment for that matter. It can be very important, the cash flow metric, to where maybe you don't want to be selling this house anytime soon, and that's the only reason you're purchasing it. Maybe the tax implications of trying to sell it down the road are irrelevant compared to the cash flow that it's generating. So, Dan mentioned some things earlier about his goals for the basement that he has. I think from what I'm hearing, that's imperative going into these is somewhat of a goal game plan that you have, not necessarily for the immediate future, but down the road as well. And how you envision this property going. Is it going to be a forever long-term, short-term rental is a part of your portfolio? Are you trying to buy and sell real estate, ongoing? And that might change your time that you want to stay in these houses.
When you're looking at doing this and you're saying, should I buy this as a primary residence or a second home or an investment property? It's ideal if this suits your lifestyle, to your point, Blair, to purchase it as a primary residence, because that opens you up to the lower down payment programs that Dan mentioned. If you meet certain income restrictions, and you can put as little as 3% down. In and around Denver, that income maximum right now is $83,000, and this is in late 2021. I'm sure they'll continue to change it going forward, but that's pretty high income. That means you can put it as little as 3% down. You can have a restriction or a reduction on your monthly mortgage insurance or your mortgage insurance requirement for that. Then, as Dan said, you are only required to live in the property for 1 year. So then you could go on to the next home and purchase it again. And there is, Freddie Mac does allow you to own one home when you can reutilize the first time home buyer program. So in theory, you could do it this way twice with as little 3% down if you meet those income restrictions. So that's a pretty awesome way to go about it.
Absolutely. And meeting those income restrictions means, in my mind, it would be really nice to have a big chunk of your mortgage paid for via these rental opportunities, freeing up more cash flow, allowing you to focus more of your capital towards other financial goals that you may have. And really, that's what this first part of our podcast has been about, is understanding ways that we can possibly look to generate more revenue. Dave Ramsey talks a lot about when you're in a financial mess or you have a financial goal, there's really 2 ways that we can go about getting to any financial goal. We can reduce our expenses on one side. That's the one that we all think about a lot, but we can also get a bigger shovel. We can get more income coming in by having some of these creative ways, and using our real estate as a possible income source, I believe, is one of those creative ways. As I just mentioned, this is a 2-part series. I'm really excited for this first part that we're able to have here today. Please, though, tune in next week or the week after, whenever we release it. That'll be up to Austin to hear the second part. Today, we talked a lot about what is house hacking. How do we maybe go about financing it? Some considerations to look into. We're going to be delving into next more of some of the mechanics that go into it, some of the pitfalls that might arise. What does the management look like of these, and continual financing options through that? Thank you both to both of our guests, Integrity Mortgage, as well as Millennial Real Estate Investor Agents, Nora and TJ, as well as Dan. We appreciate you guys' time today. Please, if you want more financial wisdom and the thoughts of millionaires, subscribe to our podcast, Mind of a Millionaire. Go to our website, denverwealthmanagement.com, sign up for our newsletter. We absolutely have contact information for Integrity Mortgage as well as Millennial Real Estate Investor Agents. And I'm assuming you guys can be found online as well.
Yes.
You assume right. Yeah.
All right. The old
Where,
Google
to both Integrity and to Dan at Millennial Real Estate Investor Agents, where can folks find you?
Yeah, for Integrity Mortgage, so all you have to go to is integritymortgageco.com, and we're right there on our website.
You can also give us a call at 303-809-5418.
And to find me, it's MREI agents with an S.com. And the best phone number to reach us is 720-466-3378.
Awesome. Well, if you are curious about how it's going with Austin staying in his garage while he has Airbnbers split with a curtain down his 1-bedroom condo, feel free to give us a call too. I'm sure Austin would be happy to walk you through that. Thank you to all of our listeners. As always, have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Austin. Thanks, Blair.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.